Hi, everybody, and welcome back to the Wolves Fancast YouTube channel for another episode of Gully's Tactical Analysis with me, Gully, obviously. I'm going to be talking about the draw with Newcastle. Really enjoyable game. It was under the lights at Molineux. Feels like the atmosphere is really kind of returning to the place at the moment, and obviously driven by the kind of endeavour and the enterprising nature of the team at the moment. And I think the fact that both teams really thought wanted to take the initiative in this game really helped it along as a spectacle. And I just wanted to touch on a couple of elements that we did really well, I think. Gary O'Neill alluded to kind of implementing a bit of a hybrid shape in and out of possession against Bournemouth. He kind of gave it up, I think, a little bit in that game, but we'll see in this fixture we actually committed to the process entirely and had quite a lot of joy with it actually. I'm just going to kind of share my screen on the tactics board just to highlight exactly what I meant by that. So talking out of possession to begin with, essentially we dropped into a 4-4-2. I think the key here was stopping the rotations that happen in wide areas for Newcastle, specifically down the right hand side. Trippier, Longstaff, and Almiron have a really good relationship. Obviously, sometimes it's Jacob Murphy you find in there as well. And they get a lot of joy down those flanks, let's be honest. Now, being in that 4-4-2 shape allowed Ryan Aitnuri to go and engage Trippier really high up the pitch and stop him specifically from getting on the ball and being able to hurt us in different situations. He's obviously up there with Neto. I think he's only one behind now on assists so far this season in the Premier League. And we actually nullified that threat really, really well. Just to kind of highlight that in an example within the game, you can see here straight away the only player out of shot is actually Totti Gomez. But a nice kind of straightforward 4-4-2 shape. Trippier here actually, I think this was maybe 15 minutes into the game, I think at this point, has actually come to sit in between Jamal Lascelles and Fabian Schär as the third centre half and look to get on the ball there, which probably goes to show up until that point in the game, he hadn't had too much joy getting down that flank and really trying to impact the final third. We were also quite aggressive in the way we wanted to press. We weren't necessarily sitting deep the entire time. You can see here Craig Dawson going in with Callum Wilson as he looks to drop deep and get possession. He won the ball high up and it launched a Wolves attack. Again, Aitnuri getting relatively tight to Trippier, and I think we managed our spaces really well within the game. There were opportunities for Newcastle to kind of break through the middle at times. We obviously only have the two central midfielders in there, but ultimately I think we were relatively comfortable with that being the case. Another situation here where we've pressed high, Trippier actually loses the ball and Matheus Cunha has a weak shot at goal from it, but this was a really good situation where Cunha intercepts and we could have made a hell of a lot more of it. And the upshot of it all, I think, ultimately is, like I say, that impact on Newcastle getting down the right hand side of the pitch and having a real influence from that side. You can see here in recent games in the Premier League against Palace, 49% of attacks going down that right hand side. I think if you recall the highlights, they absolutely obliterated Palace's left flank in that game. Against West Ham again as well, 42% of attacks going down the right flank, and that's actually kind of ended up against us with a bias towards the left, which isn't necessarily as natural because Dan Burn is playing in that left back position. He isn't going to gallop forward, at will like Trippier does. And I think it turned out to be a good game plan defensively for sure. Moving on to kind of our in possession game, you can see here from our average positions that we turned into a more of a back three shape. And I think, again, this kind of suits us for a number of reasons. I'm going to head back to the tactics board again, just very quickly, just to kind of demonstrate what I mean by that. Again, Hwang and Cunha looking to play quite narrow, but also, despite the fact, obviously, that Pedro Neto would get a lot of joy against someone like Dan Burn, I think Gary O'Neill has been trying to get him more involved in the play in in central areas for sure. So you can see here straight away we get Nelson Semedo bombing up that flank. He had another really good game as well. The back three kind of filters into quite a natural shape with Totti as the left centre half, Kilman on that right hand side. And you can see we've almost got a front five, as is the modern way almost now, with a back three, two sitting, two aggressive kind of midfielders in there who are good at stopping transitions. And Ait Nouri again, another player who's come on leaps and bounds in recent weeks and had a really positive game as well. So just again to kind of demonstrate within a real situation within the game, you can see that in this scenario, Totti feeds the ball out to Ait Nouri. You've got Nelson Semedo taking up a really high position, and Pedro Neto is able to kind of tuck in quite narrow. With those two midfielders kind of sitting there, if we do find ourselves losing the ball and get transition against. And I think coming back to the point about Neto and Semedo, you can see here that Neto is getting more involved. I highlighted this against Bournemouth as well. He is getting into more central areas, trying to have more of an influence on the inside of the pitch. I don't think he's as good as people would believe in terms of receiving the ball out wide and cutting in on his left and beating a player and trying to make something happen in that way. You know, you think about the archetype of that kind of scenario, and it's Arjen Robben. But he was a different kind of player in the sense that he had that kind of shorter stride, lots of touches when he received the ball, and he was able to shift the ball a lot quicker than Neto does. Neto obviously having that straight line speed, and when he gets into transitional moments, really tries to use it. But receiving the ball inside the pitch is probably a better way of getting him more involved in the game at the moment, rather than having it out on the flank and then cutting in. And again, just kind of exemplifies how much of an influence Semedo had high up the pitch as well. We are a team that like to carry the ball, that like to beat players, and you can see again here from all the take-ons that we completed in the game, we had a lot of joy in 1v1 battles in that sense as well. So yeah, I mean, there was a drop-off naturally after Neto went off injured. I think it just gave Newcastle a little bit more confidence to step up the pitch and take control of the game again. And it's a problem that we're going to have to try and solve. Big question now on who actually ends up taking the place of Neto against Sheffield United. Again, we'll be looking to go out and take the initiative in again and look to try and win, despite being away from home. And I've kind of done a little bit of a chart here to see who some of the options are that could step in. I've dropped in Sasha Kalajdzic, Pablo Sarabia, Fabio Silva, and Jean-Luc Bellegarde, who we haven't seen obviously for a while because of his suspension. And just a bit of an arbitrary kind of look at what their strengths are and what they aren't. I've looked at some of the things that we'd be looking for from Neto, what he gives us when he's on the pitch, and those kind of 5 areas specifically in ball carrying, pressing, a threat towards goal. The final ball and set pieces look to be kind of the strongest parts of his game. We don't have a like-for-like replacement. That's the bottom line. So who can kind of fill those gaps as best as possible, and do their best almost impression of Pedro Neto to a certain degree. Now, obviously, someone like Kalajdzic isn't that player. I've obviously included a column there to suggest there's an alteration in shape, and he would probably be introduced as a central number 9, and with Mateus Cunha and Hwang taking up those wider positions, which is an option. Pablo Sarabia, now not the most popular choice at the moment, but I think in terms of the position that he would tend to play, he's the most natural fit in that space without having the pace to really get at teams and commit defenders and things like that. And I don't think his out of possession game is very strong at all. But he does have a good goal record to speak of. His final ball, when he has time and space, is very threatening, and he has that set piece ability as well. Fabio Silva, again, I think he's someone who could potentially play in that wider forward role. I don't think Gary O'Neill sees him as a back-to-goal striker. So when he played against Blackpool, I think, and had quite a bit of joy, he played off the left-hand side, which has obviously become Hwang's position. but he can carry the ball. He is a really good worker out of possession. He does have a goal threat, contrary to popular belief. But again, not a creative presence necessarily. Obviously, not an impactful player from a set piece perspective. Which leaves Bellegarde really, who I think is the most natural fit in terms of offering as many elements of Neto's game as he can. He's not a winger. He would like to obviously operate in a bit more of a narrow position, and I think thinking about the fact that it's 4-4-2 out of possession and then that front three tucking in together in possession, I think he can really make that position his own. So I'd like to see probably Bellegarde come in and take that option. But again, it's not. It's an area that O'Neill has actually spoken about specifically to suggest that there is a lack of depth there. So we are going to struggle probably for a few games in terms of trying to replicate that impact. There will be other players that need to step up, and the introduction of quality to the team can come in different positions. I think Tommy Doyle will probably get a start this weekend. I'd be surprised if he doesn't, just based on, again, ticks that box on set piece threat. A little bit more quality in possession, which will be needed if we have a lot more of the ball in that game against Sheffield United. And I just think he's deserved it, to be fair. He's had a real impact when he's come on in the last two games specifically. And against his former club, he offers a little bit of insight probably into some of the players that the Sheffield United have. So a nice little game to ease him into and look for him to have an impact in that for sure. So looking forward to it. Again, 5 games unbeaten now. We're really starting to build up a bit of momentum. Draw, win, draw, win, draw, and hopefully a win again coming up.